Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey people, how are we doing? And welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Great to be with you all on this Tuesday afternoon. We're coming to you a little bit later on in the day today for a couple of reasons. But the main reason being, if I'm being completely honest, I woke up this morning, I thought, what really is there that I want to talk about that we didn't already cover off? And I sort of had one of those days where I was sort of sitting there racking my brain. And I just got to the point where I thought, do you know what? It's probably not worth recording a podcast today. Now, I know that's not great for those that listen regularly, who have made it a part of their routine, for which I'm very, very thankful. But that was just kind of how I felt. And I felt like if I recorded a podcast this morning, I'd be doing it for the sake of it. Okay, because nothing had really changed from an Arsenal perspective since Monday, right? But then as the day went on, as sort of certain stories started to crop up, as I sort of did my rounds of, YouTube and social media and read some of the latest articles around the Arsenal, etc., I started to be able to form the basis of a podcast. And look, we're going to talk about something that Mikel Arteta said with regards to some errors that he believes he made early on in his Arsenal career. So we're going to cover that off. We're also going to talk about the impact of our finishers based on a wonderful piece that Art de Roche has done for The Athletic. And given that it's the hot topic of debate right now, we're going to talk about what makes a good pundit. What makes a good pundit in 2026 in a world where social media has such a big impact, in a world where we're clipping people up and we're posting things without always the full context being available to those that are consuming that content. Aluko's been talking about punditry again. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. There's quite a bit to unpack in the end, considering it was a day where I thought there was nothing. But we're going to work our way through it. As I say, really, really looking forward to it. Thank you to everybody who is with us live. If you are with us live, don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, etc., etc. Get involved in the live comment section as well. I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this back on playback, also leave a like, subscribe. If you are listening on Apple or Patreon or Spotify, please be sure to leave us a review. And a massive thank you to all the new patrons that have signed up over the last few days. I really, really do appreciate the support. And you know what? I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who does something very similar, not Arsenal based, but has a podcast, set up Patreon a little while ago. And we kind of both, when we were talking, we kind of both came to the conclusion that the more patrons you have and the more support you get, the more obligation you have to then produce more and more and more and more Patreon content. And because we've managed to see that community grow actually quite a bit over the last month, I would say, it's probably the biggest growth we've had on Patreon then sort of since we started it. I think that now it's time to up the Patreon output. So it's probably a good time, if you're thinking about it, to get on board. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to check it out. Have a look. With Patreon membership, you get access to our Discord server. You get access to all our episodes ad-free, as well as that bonus content that I've just referenced. Let's kick off today's show by doing a little bit of a shout out, actually. I want to give a very, very special shout out to a very young Gooner, Kian, who's 10 years old, who traveled over from Ireland at the weekend with his mum, Amanda. They came to watch the Sunderland game. I'm told that Kian was singing all game long, and they've had a wonderful and amazing experience and a great time in North London. So thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for your listenership of the show as well. I really, really appreciate it. And I always love hearing stories of supporters who have come from overseas to get behind and support the team. So thank you for sharing that with me. And yeah, I hope you're listening to this one after all of that. Anyway, let's get into some Mikel Arteta comments. Now, Mikel Arteta in an interview that he did with a amateur coach, a Sunday league coach, if you like, who was great, by the way, and probably has a career in broadcasting at some point, given how well he conducted the interview, has talked about some of the errors that he probably made in the earlier stages of his management career. Now, it's really important to note that this was Mikel Arteta's first managerial role, or head coach role as it was when he first took it on. Yes, he's got experience at the top level as a player, but as we're going to talk about when we come to the punditry piece a little bit later on, that isn't the only thing you need. He then gets a job like the Arsenal job, where not only is there lots of pressure, lots of scrutiny, lots of focus on every single thing that you do, but there's also a lot of work to be done because of the position that Arsenal were in when he took over. He was asked by the gentleman, young coach, can't remember his name. That's really bad of me. So apologies for that. But he was asked about some of the mistakes that Mikel now, with hindsight, looks back and feels he made. And one of the things he pointed out, which I thought was quite interesting, because it kind of chimes with what we felt at times as supporters maybe about Mikel Arteta. He said that he probably was guilty of overloading players with tactical information. Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing, and if you want to find the interview in full, go over to TNT Sports Football, and the interview is there, and you can watch it. And it's towards, I'd say, about 3/4 of the way in that Mikel Arteta talks about this. But just listening to Mikel Arteta, every time I listen to him, I find it fascinating because I think he always offers a really, really interesting perspective. He's clearly someone who analyzes stuff to the nth degree, someone who puts a lot of focus on details. And there have been times where you probably feel like Arsenal have been overloaded, and that has shone through in the performance. Has it been too cautious? Has it been too safe at times? And I know, some people in the chat take issue with me using that word safe as if it's a bad thing, but we've heard people talk about Arsenal in those terms. And the point I'm making is that might have been a consequence of tactical overloads, right? If you've got so much information that you need to process, be able to recall, be able to bring to the forefront of your mind as the game is unfolding in front of you and as scenarios are developing, then that probably means there's very little capacity for you to do the spontaneous stuff. And I do think that over the years that has shone through at times in Arsenal's performances. So Mikel Arteta's acknowledged that, and Mikel Arteta has clearly moved a little bit away from that. I suppose naturally you can move away from that when you've got your players in a really good place, i.e. they've worked with you for a little while. They understand you. They understand the ins and outs of what you want. They understand what the core principles look like, what the basics are. What you then end up with and what you then get is people doing things that make up part of your core values and principles out of habit because they've been working with you for a while. It becomes second nature. And you probably get to a point where you don't have to provide as much of that tactical information. I think the more settled the team is, the more cohesion there is within a group, the more connection there is, the less tactical detail you probably have to go into. Yes, there will be certain things that are relevant to, specific games, and that will always need to be fed down to the players, and that will always need to be passed on in the way of instruction. But I think generally speaking, you can, once you've had a team, like I'm sure Gabriel, who's been here since day dot, Ben White, who's been here since day dot of this project, right? Those players, Martin Odegaard, they probably know most of what Mikel's going to tell them before he does, because it's been drilled into them for a really, really long time. There will still be cases and instances where you probably have to give more tactical information to the likes of, let's just say as an example, Eberechi Eze or Noni Madueke, who have come in this summer and are probably not as familiar with Mikel's ways as, other players that have been here on the long haul might be. So it was interesting that he's looked back and he's acknowledged that. And a lot of Arsenal fans over the years have been really, really critical of Mikel Arteta at points. And myself included, I've looked at certain things and certain decisions and felt that they were wrong, and that, it's easy to do that with hindsight. I appreciate that. And it's easy to do that from the luxury of my home studio with the heating on, sitting on a nice, comfortable chair. It's easy to do that, right? But I think the one thing that is undeniable about Mikel Arteta is that he evolves. Now, some would argue that that evolution hasn't always been as quick as they'd like it to be, that evolution hasn't always been totally for the good. Now, this is not my opinion. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm trying to give a little bit of leeway to those that maybe share a different opinion to me on this. But my point is that evolution is something that Mikel Arteta is big on. Whenever you see Arsenal go into a new season, you spot new tactical quirks, new tactical features, new elements to our game. And for the most part, that's in reaction to an experience that we've had in the past. You know, and every now and again, you get those kind of punch me moments where, you know, you get hit and you think, wow, I got to hit back here. I got to respond. How am I going to do that? This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. I'm going to adjust the way we do this. I'm going to adjust the way we do that. But it was also interesting to hear Mikel talk in this same interview about the fact that the tendency when you're at that level, every time you play a game is to focus on what you can do better and how you can improve. But sometimes you have to give yourself a moment where you look back and go, no, but actually up until this point, we've done this really well and we've done that really well. And what we need to do now is we need to improve on all those other things, but while maintaining what we're already doing, because that's a big part of why we're in the position that we're in. So it's not a long interview. I think it's about 10 minutes long in total, but it's quite insightful and one that I would recommend you go over and check out. I really enjoyed it. Next thing I want to talk about on today's pod is the impact of our finishers. As I mentioned right at the top of the show, Art de Rocher has done a fantastic piece in The Athletic where he talks about the importance and the impact of Arsenal's finishers this season. Now, so much has been made of the squad, its size, its quality, its depth. Lots has been made of, starting 11s as well. And we seem to go into every game week with lots of debates about who starts, who should start, why, what combinations work, etc., etc. And, you know, I've learned, I think, over the course of this season, yes, I have my opinion on, you know, what the 11 should look like for whatever game we're talking about, right? I've got my views, I've got my opinions. But I feel like as this season's developed and as this season's gone on, and I've seen the impact that our finishers, which is what Mikel Arteta calls them, can have off of the substitutes bench, I'm much more relaxed about what the 11 looks like than I would have been maybe a year or two ago. Again, that's testament to the strength of the squad, etc., etc. But you've also got to know as a manager who to bring on and when. You know, there's a lot of options. You know, you're sitting there at the weekend. Do you bring on Gyökeres? Do you bring on Martinelli? Do you bring on Norgard? Is that what it needs? Do you bring on Eza? You know, there's all sorts of conundrums and sort of scenarios that can play out and develop, and you're going to have to find the right solution at that right time. And sometimes you've got like 10, 15 minutes left of a game and you've got to pick the right solution. And that is the art, obviously, of management. But it was really interesting to read Art's piece. It is behind the paywall on The Athletic, so I'm not going to read it out to you. But some of the things he highlighted that really kind of caught my attention. Arsenal rank first in the Premier League for goals scored and assisted by substitutes with 16. Now, 6 of that 16, so that's more than a third, have been game state changing. So that means that those goals or assists that they provided led to equalizers or goals that put Arsenal in front. So we're not talking sort of solely about substitutes coming on in game states where the game's already won, the job's already done, the game's stretched, the game's open, and these lot are going out there and stat padding. No, these guys are having a tangible impact on the outcomes of our games. And that's why we call them game state changing goals or assists, because what they do is they take the situation of the game and at times they flip it on its head. At times, maybe, you know, they strengthen your position. There'll be goals where we've scored and there's been assists that have been provided that have helped consolidate, but 6 of the 16 have been game state changing. And that is really, really important. And again, you know, it's a nod, isn't it, to the quality of the squad that we have. Nobody will be surprised to read this stuff because we all know it deep down. But I think sometimes when someone collates all the information and puts it into a really nice, presentable piece, it kind of makes it much easier to process, doesn't it? And to understand. And that's what I really enjoyed about Art's piece, is that, I could have probably guessed that Arsenal ranked first in the Premier League for goals scored or assisted by substitutes. I might not have known the numbers, but I could have guessed that they were up there. I could have guessed that quite a few of those goals have been, as he's put it, game state changing. But sometimes you need that information collated and presented in the right way for it to kind of really sink in. And reading this piece this afternoon really kind of shone a light for me on not just how good a squad we've got, how deep a squad we've got, the quality of the depth, but how well you have to say most of the time Mikel Arteta has been able to manage it this season, because that is a big thing. I've said all season long, if we're going to win this thing, okay, it will be largely down to Mikel Arteta getting the management right along the way. And it's not just management in terms of who you bring off the bench. It then sort of roots back to the team selection. It roots back to situations where you've had injuries, where you've had players missing, and you've had to think outside the box and come up with alternative ways of making the impact that you're looking for. But I just wanted to highlight the impact of our finishers. Now, we're going to take a really short pause. When we come back, we are going to dive into the chat box, and then we're going to talk about what makes a great pundit. That seems to be the hot topic of the day. So we're going to have our 2 pence on it as well. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe. Let's take some of your comments from the live chat. Joey Moody said, cheers, Harry and fellow Gooners. Glad to catch a live. Can we agree that Mikel has had a fault at overplaying certain players due to safe playing? Yeah, I think we can agree on that. I've certainly felt that was the case in previous seasons. And you could argue that it's even been the case with certain individuals this time around as well. But I do think he's improved with that. And I think the more faith and trust you have in your wider group, the easier it is to kind of be that little bit more open to the risk that comes with rotation. Skillman Swift said he's fortunate to get the time at Arsenal to evolve. Just talking about Mikel Arteta there. Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't push back on that. It's not every day that managers get the time that Arsenal have given to Mikel Arteta nowadays, but hopefully by the end of his tenure, we'd have reaped the rewards for that. Nelson says, what do you think about the tactical change from our last few games? Is 4-4-2 the way to go? I think the 4-4-2 out of possession thing is something that we've used very regularly, actually, over the last 2-3 seasons. But we've sort of used it in phases, I would argue. I think it's something we're using right now. I think if you use Havertz as that kind of second striker, or if it's Odegaard playing in that position, he goes up and becomes the second player in the press. And I think it's because it throws up something different. I think about how a lot of teams approach the game right now. You very rarely see front twos in the Premier League, don't you? Which means that centre-backs often have a lot of time to get the ball under control. They can, stroke it around between themselves, and often, they're not going to be dispossessed. All of a sudden, if two centre-halves have got two lads squeezing up on them, that changes things. So I think it's about being different. It's about showing a different face and trying to do something slightly different in terms of what the opposition is expecting. Just reading through some of your comments. AFC DMB says, we'll know if Mikel's getting it right when Odegaard is fully fit or not. If he shoves him back in, then he hasn't learned a thing. No, but Odegaard's going to play games, man, between now and the end of the season. Like, he's going to play games. He's the club captain. He's going to feature. I agree that right now, on form, he shouldn't be in the side. And, that Kai Havertz should be in the side ahead of him. But then you think back to that Leeds game, which wasn't that long ago now, although it feels a little while back. Odegaard came off the bench and was sensational. So maybe that's the way that you use Odegaard for the next few weeks. And then there'll come a point, I'm sure, where Kai Havertz drops off a little bit, and then you can make that change. Form is really, really important. When you've got the options that we do, form is really, really important. Okay, let's get on to, I suppose it's the main topic of today's pod, really. Let's talk a little bit about Eni Aluko and the comments that she has made. What makes a great pundit? Well, this question has come about because Eni Aluko has been talking about the fact that she feels wronged. She feels it unfair, unjust that she wasn't a part of the punditry team for the Women's Euros with ITV. She also pointed out who was doing the job for BBC. She used Farrell Williams' name as well as another person who ought to have been on the panels but wasn't, etc., etc. And what that's done is just sparked this long debate about what makes a good pundit. Now, listen, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of what Eni Aluko said. I'm not going to sit here and attack Eni Aluko. Okay, as a pundit, do I particularly rate her? No. She probably wouldn't rate me as a commentator. She probably wouldn't give me the time of day in terms of where sort of I am on the scale, right? So it's not to be like you're crap and you don't deserve to do anything. That I'm not being that guy. Okay, there's enough people piling onto Eni Aluko online, which is obviously wrong. And it's seen people step over the line, as they always tend to do in the Wild West that is X and various other platforms, right? So I don't condone that stuff for a second. But I do look at this and I do think to myself, what good have you done for your career, Eni, by doubling down on this stuff? She talked about men involved in the women's game and kind of suggested that Ian Wright should take a bit of a back seat. She's since talked about Ian Wright having the potential to use his influence at ITV to help her and deciding not to do that. He doesn't owe her anything. He's not obligated to do anything like that. She just keeps on doubling down. And she clearly feels that the reason she has not got the punditry work that she wants right now, or that her ITV contract was ended, she clearly thinks that that's because of other reasons. Okay, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whatever, these are all things that along the way in some interview or another she has raised and brought up. I don't deny that those issues exist in the world. I don't live them, so it's wrong of me to pretend to understand. And I can say it's wrong, but I can never truly understand the extent of it and how it makes you feel, because I haven't experienced it. Okay. And I always think that one of the worst things you can do is downplay something and dismiss something because you yourself have not been on the receiving end of it. So I've got a lot of sympathy for anyone that's experienced anything like that. And I think it's wrong and it shouldn't happen. Okay. But in Eni Aluko's case specifically, I don't think that's why she's not working as a pundit. And I think the reason there's been such a backlash to all the things that she's saying is because I don't think most people believe that that's the reason that she's not working in those specific jobs. She keeps talking about how she's got X amount of England caps. I think it's 105. I know that because she's mentioned it so many times. Okay, cool. That's great. You were a brilliant player. But then this takes me on to the question, which is what I really want to kind of delve into, of what makes a great pundit. What makes a great pundit? Because this idea that just because you've got England caps, you're a great pundit and you're entitled to hold that role down and to be, one of the go-tos, it's a wrong way of looking at it, okay? I think that one of the greatest players to ever grace the Premier League is Dennis Bergkamp. Have you ever seen Dennis Bergkamp near television, near UK television? I don't know if he does anything in his home country, but I've not seen it. So there are great players that don't go down that route. There are a lot of players whose careers, you would argue, were more modest, but make for much better pundits because they articulate themselves in a great way, because they're very analytical in the way they view the game. And they're very, very insightful because they use the experience that they have, but they then have the skills to turn that into insightful punditry and analysis. There are people in the Arsenal community that I'm more interested in hearing from after a game than I am from hearing from the mainstream pundits, your Gary Nevilles, your Jamie Carragher's, etc., etc. Each of them bring their own thing to the table, okay? Roy Keane is Mr. Grumpy, right? And people find that funny and people find that entertaining. Gary Neville's analysis used to be quite good. I think he's gone in a slightly different direction recently, which I don't particularly enjoy, but I still have respect for the job that he does. Jamie Carragher's analysis can be really, really good. These guys all have biases, though. And those biases are not going to just be switched off, because the very nature of football means that rivalry is at the core and at the center of it. And the fact that people sit there at times and expect these guys to wash their hands of all their former allegiances and zap their brains of it as if it never happened, that's wild to me. There's a lot of people that I respect and I listen to, but I don't agree with every single word. Simon Jordan's a great example of that for me on TalkSport. I don't agree with everything that Simon Jordan says. I don't agree with every word. In fact, I'd say there's a lot of stuff that I disagree with him on. I think it could be at times 50-50. But because he's very articulate, because his arguments are clearly very well thought out, I respect his view and I respect his opinion. Whether I take it on board or agree with it or not is another thing. And I don't understand why we live in this world where people can't be mature enough anymore to say, you're quite a good pundit, you're quite good at what you do, but me personally, I don't agree with you on this. Without it meaning, oh, why is he in that job? Tear him down, he's terrible, etc., etc. There are Arsenal podcasters out there that I would put ahead of these people in terms of what I want at the end of a football match. And that's a testament to some of the brilliant people that we have within our community. It's a testament to the way social media has given people a voice. But I guess I wanted to break down for you guys what makes a good pundit, because I think that's the conversation here. The Eni Aluko stuff, you know, it's engagement farming to a degree, isn't it? Because every time she sits in front of a microphone and this type of debate comes up, for me, she does herself damage, because she says things that have no basis and, in my opinion, come across as quite silly. And Simon Jordan said that she comes across as entitled. And she might not want that. That might not be the intention, but it does come across that way. And I've just been watching sort of some of the interviews that she's done, some of the stuff that's been doing the rounds recently. And I watched the segment on TalkSport today, which is kind of what sparked my interest in discussing this topic. She had that debate with Simon Jordan today, and I thought he completely killed her in the debate. Like, I thought he completely won the debate. And the reason for that is because everything she's saying is, you know, is clearly based on a sort of injustice that she feels and doesn't represent the bigger picture. Do I think there is racism around? Yeah, of course I do. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've heard it with my own ears. Do I think that it's probably harder for certain ethnic minorities to get into these positions? Probably, yeah. Probably, yeah. But I'm of an ethnic minority and I get to do the job that I love, not at the same level, not on the same scale, obviously. But I can't sit here and say that it's such a terrible thing that it blocks you. And that's the sole reason why any person, doesn't have to be Eni Aluko, wouldn't get a job in this day and age. So I think if you're good enough, you will cut through. And I just think on the whole Eni Aluko debate, she's just not good enough as a pundit. And then you think about the damage that Joey Barton done, and that I do have sympathy for her on that, because Joey Barton's vile and he just went off on one. And there's an army of minions that follow everything he says. And that probably became really difficult for Eni Aluko to handle. But in terms of what I think makes a good pundit, I think you've got to be insightful. Tell me something I didn't know. Show me something in the game that the first time around I didn't see. Give me something to think about. Give my brain something to work on. Deliver it well. Deliver it with personality. Deliver it with passion. Deliver it in a way that is entertaining for the viewer. And then I think about some of, the good bits of punditry that I've seen in recent times. I think it was it the Euros or the last World Cup? I think it might have been the Euros. I really, really enjoyed Cesc Fabregas's punditry. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was refreshing. I thought it was well delivered. I thought it was really insightful. I thought it was great. And I think as a pundit, you've got to find that sweet spot between being really kind of stats and analysis heavy, but also being entertaining. And I think there's pundits that sort of do different aspects of that and therefore then complement each other when they're on a panel. So I think, for example, Jamie Carragher's quite good at the whole bring up the pitch on the screen thing, draw the lines, etc., etc. And then I think Micah Richards is fantastic at being entertaining, right? So between the two of them, there's quite a nice dynamic. And that's really, really important, I think, when picking a panel. I enjoyed Fabregas's punditry, as I've just mentioned. Victor Gyökeres was analysed recently, wasn't he, by Thierry Henry not too long ago. I thought that was really, really insightful punditry about the angle of his runs and how he takes the ball on and what that then means for the next action, etc., etc. And in Thierry Henry's case, it's really, really good punditry and analysis, but you've also got the gravitas because of what you've done in the game. You've also got the ability to deliver it well with a bit of va-va-voom. And all of those things combined make that really, really good punditry, don't they? So it's to me, it's quite clear what makes a good pundit. It's quite clear what good punditry looks like. And I think with the emergence of podcasts and YouTube and all the data that's available to fans now, et cetera, the world has changed. The landscape has changed. And there's people now that are online and are very, very good at what they do and are very, very good at providing and producing that analysis. And so now they come into the mix and it's a totally different landscape. We shouldn't be afraid of things being different, of things changing, of things evolving. But it did get me thinking today about what makes a good pundit, because those things that I've just listed off, I'm not asking for 20 things. I'm not asking for a ton of things. I'm asking for just a few core principles that I think you need to, or a few markers that I think you need to hit. And beyond that, you be you. And some people come across as really warm and really likable, and that will stand them in good stead in a role like that. And others don't. And if you don't have that personality, I've worked with a co-commentator before. I'm not going to mention names. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I'm great at my job. I'm not saying that for a second. I'm still learning. But I worked with a co-commentator once that had the personality of an ironing board. And that made my job really hard. It meant there was no chemistry between us. It meant that I was having to do more than I would when I'm working with someone who's of a better level. And again, that's not me saying I'm on my high horse, whatever. This person was well below the standard that's required. But I just, the point I'm trying to make is that you know how you feel when you watch a pundit, and you will either warm to them or not. And even if you warm to them and really, really like them, there will still be days where you think you're talking complete and utter BS. And why? Because football's a game of opinions, and that's all right. But I think Eni Aluko has, and I saw someone put it this way on social media, I think it might have been Dan O'Hagan, where he said, it's like she's taken a sledgehammer to her own career. I don't think all this stuff and the continuation of it, and then going on White and Jordan today, where you're going to get torn apart by Simon Jordan, who's a shark when it comes to debates, right? I don't think that was a particularly wise move for Eni Aluko. And I've actually watched that, and I think people are going to have even less sympathy for you after that. But again, in all of this, I think she's wrong in the debate. And I think she's wrong to raise or to claim that some of the issues she claims are the sole reasoning behind her not having the punditry work that she wants right now. But at no point do I think it's okay for people to go and abuse her and cross those lines, as we see over and over and over again. And you know that it's coming with Eni Aluko because she's been involved in some controversial conversations and discussions before. And whenever those things crop up again on social media, you see them catch fire again. It like spreads like wildfire again. And that, she's done what she's done. She said what she said. People make mistakes. And it's horrible when people keep bringing up your mistakes over and over again as if you have not learned or improved from them. But on this debate about her as a pundit and what makes a good pundit, and that's why I wanted to focus on the what makes a good pundit more than anything else. I don't think you need to sit there and spell it out to viewers. I don't think you need to sit there and justify, what makes a good pundit by saying things to the effect of, yeah, but I've played 105 times for England. People will watch, people will listen, and they'll make their own minds up about whether they think you're good enough or not. And just because someone hasn't come up to you directly and said, you're not good enough, that's why we're getting rid of you, that doesn't mean that isn't what they're thinking. I've had gigs, jobs in the past where after a while people said, yeah, sorry, mate, we ain't got the budget anymore. That probably wasn't the case. It probably was never the case. It was probably that they didn't think it was working for whatever reason. They wanted to let me down gently, and that's the way they went about it. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of touch on that debate and the punditry debate because I think it's an interesting one. I'm just scrolling through. I'm just scrolling through some of your comments on this because I think it's quite interesting to get a variety of opinions on this. And also she kind of rode back on some of the stuff she said about, how men shouldn't be. She basically said when she was talking about those panels for the Euros final, she said, 2 of the 6 spots or whatever it was were taken up by men. And then today she's like, well, you can have men, but they shouldn't be part of the main panel, which is not even a wild take to have, because I think there's a lot of men that would feel that women shouldn't be on the panels in a men's game. I'm not sure either of those viewpoints is right. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, or the right thing is somewhere in the middle. And I think that if you're good enough, you should be able to do it. Like I saw some people sort of going after Laura Woods on social media for the comments that she made about it. Laura Woods is a sports presenter because she's bloody good at it. Whether you like some of her views or not, Laura Woods is flipping good at her job and she deserves to be there. And it's nothing to do with who she is, where she's from, what she looks like, etc., etc. And the point I'm trying to make is that in this day and age, I think we're mature enough, generally speaking, to look past that. And I'm not saying that any Aluko hasn't experienced any of the difficulties that she claims, because I don't know, do I? I haven't got a clue. But I think if you're not getting punditry work, there's probably a need, at least first, to look at yourself and try and figure out why that might be before you go out publicly and pin it on everybody else. I'm just reading some of your comments on this. Donovan says, I don't think there will ever be a perfect pundit. I agree with that. Thomas says, I think you're conflating 2 things here. Her abilities as a pundit versus the issue of representation in a competitive field. So I think we do end up conflating these 2 things when we talk about this, because Eni Aluko keeps conflating the 2 things. And that's kind of the point here. I think her abilities as a pundit are not at the level of some of the better pundits. And therefore I can understand why big broadcasters would go down a different route. The issue of representation is important, but it's still got to be a meritocracy. And I'm sure that there are people that would represent certain communities out there that would do the job to a better standard than Eni Aluko. In which case, you solve both of those issues. You solve the issue of having a pundit that isn't quite at the level that you want, and you solve the issue of representation. It's not that there's a shortage of good people. There's lots of good people. You've got to try, for me, and tackle both of those issues. They're both really important issues. You've got to tackle both of them. I think that's really important. Really important. Right, I am going to leave it there. And when I say both those issues, I mean the representation thing, which I think is important, but also the person has to be at that level. And there are, you know, if you're talking about any Aluko's case, there are black people out there that are much, much better than any Aluko is as a pundit, in my opinion. Do you see what I'm saying? So you can address the representation thing if you know, you think that that's really, really important. And you can also improve the standard. And any Aluko does not improve the standard, in which case people would argue, it's not necessarily what I'm saying, because I don't know, but people would argue that the representation thing has taken priority there. And that's where you get that then sort of clash of opinions where people start butting heads, etc., etc. And that's where you get this whole debate that you've seen unfold across multiple platforms over the last few days. But bottom line for me, I don't think she's a good enough pundit. And I think that if you are a really good pundit and then you're experiencing those issues, then you can point to those things. But I think if you're not a good pundit and you're pointing to those things without any acknowledgement of the mistakes that you've made, the things that you've done that probably aren't up to the standard, then I think your argument, which is a really important one, loses. People jump off your sort of bandwagon, if that makes sense. Because it's kind of like, well, you had me when you were talking about representation, because that's absolutely right. But you lost me when you went on TV and made lots of, quite frankly, basic mistakes. And I think it's actually damaging to the cause that is really and truly important here, because it's being conflated with something else. So you say that I'm conflating the 2 points, and I am. And I know I am. I'm aware I am. And I'm doing that because that's what this debate has developed and turned into. But anyway, it's a really, really interesting debate. It's a really, really interesting subject. I just think, to summarize, in any Aluko's case, I don't think the reasons she's not getting the jobs that she wants are solely the reasons that she thinks. I think there's other reasons, the main one being that I don't think they rate her that much. And in which case, you know, we're almost disrespecting the importance of the actual cause that we're talking about here, which is the DEI stuff, which is important. It is important. There's no doubt about that. But you dilute it when you try and pretend that someone who clearly isn't a good enough pundit is. Do you see what I'm saying? Anyway, going to leave it there. Thank you so much. I will catch you all very, very soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day up the Arsenal. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.